There is very little this race of beings and I agree on. Yet, despite the sharp division in the way we look at reality, mankind and I do seem to share one thing in common. Virtually all of us, me included, believe there are at least 5 things that are causing serious problems for us. What divides me from everyone else is in our position on whether what I have done is impossible or not. The world says what I have done is impossible to do. This means that in the eyes of the world, I am a liar or insane. I agree with the world that what I have done is impossible for anyone else to do. Had I the abilities of my detractors, I would indeed not have accomplished what I did. All I can say is being told repeatedly that what I have done is impossible has been a real ego booster. The world is right in that no one in this system could solve what I solved, perhaps because of the difficulty in solving them, but more likely because this system is its problems, and you cannot solve its problems without rejecting the system that posits them as solution. If I was of this world, I could not solve these problems of this world, any more than you can. I am the first person to admit that so long as we remain in this system, the 5 impossibles are impossible to solve. We need to step outside of the parameters of this world to fix them. In short, we need to separate from this world to eliminate its problems. The 5 impossible problems discussed here are unemployment, the state, war and crime, the classical free market, and debt. To expand on these items, before we discuss them more fully, when we mention unemployment, we mean wasted work and no work. Everything the state does, what lawyers do, and bankers and investors is considered unemployment because it produces no true goods or services. Unemployment also includes those on welfare and all make-work jobs. If what is produced is not purchased because the buyer wants the good or service to the level that he or she will exchange some of the value he or she created to make use of what the seller offers, the thing being produced ought not be produced. So, there is an interconnection between the different items on the above list. To create full employment, we need to end the state and asset-based money. To end the state, a condition often called anarchy, requires far more than just the abolition of the state. This is the flaw anarchists have never faced up to, but which conscious readers of anarchist works always recognize, even if in not so many words. It is not enough to end the state. To end the state, we have to end the desire of ruthless men to re-establish the state. No state existed at the time of Nimrod, nor did it exist anywhere at the dawn of history, but man created the state, despite it being a bloody and traumatic time. With the state must go the legal system and taxation. The belief that public works cannot be produced without the state must also be addressed. The discussions below are not exhaustive. They are provided to show that a framework for their resolution does exist. It is up to the reader to search the material offered on this site for more developed and exhaustive arguments. The solutions, being dependent on the implementation of an alternative system, are discussed as part of a concept community called separatin, or the separate place. Unemployment. There is nothing more irrational than unemployment. There is nothing that highlights the insanity of a system more than a portion of the adult population having no work. But this is only part of the problem. An even more troublesome aspect exists, and that is technical unemployment. Technical unemployment is a state or condition in which a person earns a wage but produces no marketable product or service, therefore is generally paid out of special funds created to produce the impression of people working, without there being a need to create actual jobs. Bankers, politicians, investors, insurance companies, social workers, and lawyers, amongst others, are all technically unemployed. None of they produce anything useful or produce goods and services anyone actually wants. The reality is, society would be better off if they all stopped working and went on permanent welfare. I just saw a post on LinkedIn which made me realize how many people still think increasing the money supply or redistributing it is a solution to poverty and therefore unemployment. Let me ask you this. If you were in a disabled boat in the middle of the ocean with no rescue in sight, do you think increasing the money supply for the passengers or redistributing the money the passengers have will alleviate the food and water shortage? Why would it work on a larger scale if it does not work on the smaller scale? Yet, year after year, every government in the world takes money from subjects and redistributes it, thinking this will give their subjects more to eat and drink. Giving money to those who are below the poverty line would do nothing but increase the poverty line to a new and higher level. Poverty has nothing to do with how much money exists or how it is distributed. It is how much goods and services are being produced per person per unit of time. If you do not increase productivity, producing the money supply does nothing but produce money with less value. Employment is the production of things with value that others will obtain willingly through the mechanisms of the market, using an equal amount of labor for the exchange. There are good people in this world, and there are evil people. The good engage in labor to produce equity to replenish the earth. We call them a priorians. The labor of one a priorian is equal in value with the labor of all others producing things with real value. Therefore, in an a priorian system, the products and services created are exchangeable on a time-for-time basis. In other words, your hour of labor is equal in value with an hour of my productive time. This production of things with value separates the a priorian from those who are technically unemployed. In separaton, which contains a mechanism for separating church from the state, everyone works and everyone is paid. There is no unemployment in separaton because anyone who needs work is permitted to work, and the work they do generates the value needed to pay them. Work creates value, and this value serves as the basis for the issue of equity notes, which are used to pay workers for their labor. If a person can work, he works, and if he works, he is paid because of the value his work creates. Thus, there is no unemployment in separaton. The state. People think it is impossible to get rid of the state, because the state has made it impossible to eliminate the state, so long as it exists. It creates its own legitimacy, but it has none that is not fabricated by itself. In other words, the state has no natural legitimacy. If everyone was honest, there would be no need for the state. Yet, the honest person still has no need for the state, other than the need the state creates to justify its existence. By delegitimizing the ownership of equity, the state makes ownership a legal issue, which it alone can adjudicate. This is why there is a need to separate from the state. By claiming assets, that is the geographical expanse of the nation, as property belonging to it, the state becomes the gateway to the people's ability to survive. To live, the people must have access to the assets claimed, without justification, by the state. If all property is claimed by the state, then the state is in a position to impose conditions upon any subject who wishes to access the assets of the nation. Thus, there is a partnership between the state and the select group of individuals who have the means to acquire property from the state. Ownership is a type of license the state issues to give certain privileged persons the use of certain parts of the nation. It all starts with the state taking possession of the assets within a jurisdiction. Whether you have communism or capitalism depends on how much power the state permits the licensee to have. If the people got rid of the state, the assumption is that we would have precisely what we have now, but there would be no state. In fact, what we have is the creation of the state in an effort to legitimize its existence. Even so, getting rid of the state would only eliminate the immediate problem. But it's the desire for power that is the real source of the problem, which is why we ended up with the state in the first place. To get rid of the nation-state would give us an unlimited number of gang-run jurisdictions. When states become weak, it is gangs that take over, not pastoral communities. Yet, we are all complicit in this system of thugduggery. It is as said a system based on the doctrine that might makes right, and the end justifies the means. Until we separate from this system, things will not improve. In truth, we own only what we create, and we have no rights to anything we did not create. But mankind never figured out a way to separate what he owns from what others own. This goes especially for God's creation. We have carelessly assumed ownership of assets that do not and cannot belong to us. Giving the state authority over the assets of the nation fixes nothing. What needs to be done is to divide the assets that belong to God from the equity that belongs to us. The vehicle for doing this was the church, but this has been corrupted by the ideas of this world. This is why the only solution is to separate. A priorian apologetic gives reasons for the faith we have in the separation we are able to produce. The a priologist seeks to increase the equity of earth through mastering the art of adding value to the things of God. A priologists do not seek to create profits, but equity. Apologia are places designed to practice and implement apologetic. The reason for the faith we have is the equity we create. Apologia serves as a place where equity can be created and harvested and multiplied. Apologians do not own the things of God. We steward the world's resources to produce the greatest increase. The ending of war and crime. It is vitally important to already understand the link between crime and war. The difference is one of degree, not qualitative. There is only one thing of value in this world, and it is value itself, or equity. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. The condition it is in is defined by the equity it contains. Destroying the earth is to destroy the equity it contains and the equity we could produce. There is only one enemy or evil in the world, and that is free riders. Freeloading consumes equity. Those are the parameters we must work with, and which determines our level of success. If we all worked and we all paid our own way, there would be no free riders, no parasites, and if these were eradicated, there would be no war, no crime, and no state, or those who are subsidized by the state. It would be a world of honesty and equality. One cannot wage war without wanting what others have, nor can war be waged without expropriating what others produce. The same goes for crime. Criminals always destroy value. Criminals are always free riders. It is only by enforcing honesty and equality on everyone that we can end war and crime. The classical free market. The free market is not a free market because it cannot survive without the protection of the state. It is, in its present form, more properly thought of as a black market. It is open to all sorts of perfidy and criminal enterprise because the goods and services it sells are illicit. A truly free market in the sense that the classical writers meant, even if they did not always understand what they were aspiring to bring about, must work with the labor theory of value. A priori are small groups operating according to the labor theory of value and the principle of subsidiarity. Only by keeping power at the base can a free market exist. But without faith, there is no free market, because people need to have faith in one another to eliminate the sense of risk that causes controls to be imposed on the market. A free market must deal in honestly owned goods and services for those who use the market to have faith in its mechanisms. Faith in the mechanisms of the market means there can be no liabilities. The need for faith and the need for honesty to have faith is the step passed over by this world we are in, the apriotic world. Anything can have access to the apriotic market, and even though there are laws in place, there is nothing about the markets of this world that prevents anything being bought and sold. Possession, as they say, is 9/10 of the law, and the only thing that matters to the market is the buyer and the seller, not the owner. There needs to be a line between the person who has a right to buy and sell and the illegitimate player. This line is defined by what we know of as charity. The legitimate owner of it can be charitable. A person who has things he does not rightfully own cannot be considered charitable. He is giving away what does not even belong to him. Parasites cannot be charitable because they pose a liability to everyone they meet. Those in the small group work for the charity which they represent. They create value though labor and are paid for the labor they do. Because everyone works in a priori and everyone gets paid, unemployment is set at 0. Everyone works and everyone is paid. Thus, everyone has an income based on the work they do, and when goods and services are purchased, the prices reflect what a free market would levy. Debt. Everything is related. It is because of debt that the other problems exist. Unemployment, for example, creates debt, and debt creates or exacerbates unemployment. Debt is a liability attached to property, but it is property that already is a liability because the possession of property always poses a threat to the one claiming it, as the claim can and often is contested. The earth proper is composed of assets, and these all belong to God, as they were all created by God. Mankind has no legitimate claim on assets. However, the things of the earth are not readily usable by man. They need to be reaped and processed before use. Shelter and clothing has to be created. This gives man a right to claim what he or she created. This poses something of a problem because God owns the material out of which the goods and services are made, but it is man that modifies and transforms the asset into something more useful. The problem, then, is how to separate the one from the other. It cannot be done within the present system, or what we call the apriotic system. Some persons think they own the raw materials of the earth and therefore can pay people to do the transformative work, but the money they pay them will never represent the full value of their labor. Separaton is not just a place or model community. It is a mechanism or technology for separating church from state, good from evil, and assets from equity. What belongs to man is credited to man, and those who create the wealth are given credit for the wealth they create, and those who do not create wealth are separated from what they have no right to.